Have you ever noticed that the clearer someone sees, the less comfortable others become around them? Not because that person is loud, not because they are arrogant, but because clarity removes the blur people rely on to feel safe. There is a quiet pattern almost no one speaks about. The more accurately someone reads reality, the more tension they unintentionally create. And it doesn't happen for dramatic reasons. It happens in subtle ways. Intelligence is usually portrayed as an advantage, a gift, a private asset that guarantees success. But socially, it doesn't always function like a reward. In many environments, intelligence does not attract admiration. It attracts resistance. And that resistance is rarely loud. It doesn't shout. It doesn't attack. It shows up as distance, polite coldness, fewer invitations, less enthusiasm, opportunities that quietly disappear. And this pattern begins early. In school, the student who asks deeper questions is labeled difficult. In the workplace, the person who identifies structural problems is called negative. In friendships, the one who spots contradictions is told they overthink. None of this is random. Human groups are built for stability. They rely on shared assumptions, shared pace, shared emotional rhythm. And when someone consistently thinks faster, sees patterns earlier, or questions rules no one openly discusses, they disrupt that rhythm. The disruption is quiet, but it is real. Most people don't consciously think, I dislike this person because they are intelligent. What they feel is harder to name: exposure. And this is where it becomes uncomfortable. Intelligent individuals often perceive motives behind actions. They detect contradictions. They sense insecurity hidden beneath confidence. They notice power dynamics others prefer to ignore. And when someone feels observed at that depth, it creates tension. Not admiration, not ease, tension. Because being understood too clearly can feel like losing control. This is the paradox. Greater awareness often means less social comfort, and in many spaces, comfort is valued more than insight. But there is another layer to this, one that is even less visible. Intelligence quietly disrupts hierarchy. Every group has an invisible ranking system. It isn't always about money or titles. More often, it revolves around perceived competence, influence, and confidence. When someone repeatedly demonstrates sharper reasoning or more accurate predictions, they subtly shift the balance, even if they never compete, even if they never seek authority. Competence has gravity, and people instinctively compare themselves. When they meet someone who processes information faster or expresses ideas with unusual precision, an internal recalculation begins. Am I as capable? Am I as sharp? Do I still hold my place here? That recalculation is uncomfortable, and discomfort rarely stays neutral. It often transforms into distance. Instead of acknowledging someone's ability, a group may reduce them socially. They may describe them as intense, cold, arrogant. These labels act as equalizers. They minimize the perceived threat. It is easier to call someone arrogant than to admit you feel intellectually challenged. It is easier to say someone is too much than to confront your own limits. And intelligent individuals often sense this shift without fully understanding it. The tone of conversations changes. Jokes no longer include them. Their ideas receive less enthusiasm. Not because they were wrong, but because they were right too often. And here's something most people don't expect. In many environments, consistent accuracy does not increase belonging. It reduces it. Because belonging is the currency people protect most. There is also the matter of pace. Intelligent individuals tend to move through ideas quickly. They anticipate conclusions before others finish explaining the premise. Sometimes they interrupt, not out of disrespect, but because the outcome is already visible to them. To others, this feels destabilizing. Social interaction depends on shared tempo. When one person operates at a noticeably different cognitive speed, conversational harmony shifts. The faster thinker may feel restless. The slower thinker may feel pressured. Neither side intends harm, but friction forms. And over time, difference in pace becomes emotional distance. The intelligent person may withdraw to avoid frustration. The group may interpret that withdrawal as superiority. And this is where the misunderstanding deepens. Silence from someone highly perceptive is rarely experienced as neutral. Even when it is simply observation, others interpret it as judgment. When a person speaks less but notices more, their quiet becomes a mirror, and people project onto that mirror. They imagine criticism, they imagine analysis, they imagine evaluation. When in reality, the person may just be thinking, just processing. But here's the crucial part. Perception shapes social reality. If someone feels evaluated, they don't wait for proof. They become defensive. And defensiveness slowly reshapes relationships. This is why highly intelligent individuals often occupy a strange position. They are not attacking anyone, yet they are treated as if they are, because awareness changes atmosphere. And not everyone feels comfortable in a space where nothing slips by unnoticed. There is another layer to this. Intelligent people tend to resist collective illusions. Every social environment runs on small, shared fictions, unspoken agreements. This is how we do things. This person deserves authority. This system works. Most people absorb these assumptions without examining them, but independent thinkers naturally question structure. Not aggressively, not rebelliously, logically. And this is where tension begins. When someone asks why too often, the question stops feeling intellectual. It starts feeling political. Challenging assumptions can look like challenging authority, and authority rarely responds warmly to that. In professional settings, the independent thinker becomes not a team player. In families, they are labeled difficult. In social circles, they slowly drift toward the edges, because groups protect their internal narrative. And intelligence quietly tests whether that narrative holds together. That creates what you could call a social tax. The more someone prioritizes truth over comfort, the more frequently they must choose between authenticity and acceptance. And that choice is exhausting. Many intelligent individuals learn to dim their analysis, to soften their precision, to reduce friction. But even softened clarity is still clarity. Difference remains visible. And cognitive difference in particular creates unease, not because it is hostile, but because it exposes how fragile certain systems actually are. There is also an emotional dimension few people openly discuss. Highly intelligent individuals often struggle with shallow interaction, not from arrogance, but from stimulation thresholds. They crave nuance, complexity, depth. Small talk feels draining, predictable stories feel repetitive, and when they withdraw from these exchanges, others may interpret it as superiority or disinterest. But often, it's simply misalignment. Depth-oriented individuals ask questions that bypass surface comfort. They explore motives, contradictions, fears, ambitions. For some, this feels invigorating. For others, it feels invasive. And in environments where emotional ease is valued more than intellectual exploration, the deeper thinker gradually becomes peripheral. The isolation is rarely dramatic. It happens quietly. Fewer messages, fewer invitations, less inclusion in informal spaces. Because people gravitate toward situations where they feel capable and relaxed. If interacting with someone consistently highlights your blind spots, you may unconsciously distance yourself. Not out of malice, but out of self-protection. And over time, the intelligent individual may internalize the pattern. They begin to wonder why connection feels conditional. The answer is rarely simple, but it often traces back to difference. There is another overlooked factor: predictability. Intelligent individuals often recognize patterns before others do. They anticipate consequences. They sense shifts in tone, power, intention. This foresight subtly alters dynamics. When someone predicts outcomes accurately again and again, interaction stops feeling symmetrical. One person sees more. The other senses that imbalance, and asymmetry reduces comfort.
because most people prefer relationships that feel equal.
When one person consistently displays sharper awareness, others don't always feel connected. They feel observed. An observation, even silent, has weight. It signals awareness. And awareness narrows the space for performance. Because when someone truly sees, pretense becomes fragile. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Pretense is often what keeps social harmony intact. Shared illusions smooth interaction. They reduce friction. They maintain comfort. The person who quietly sees through those illusions disrupts that balance. Not intentionally, not aggressively, simply by understanding. And that understanding shifts the atmosphere. There is also a paradox around confidence. Intelligent individuals who recognize their own ability often choose restraint. They minimize their competence. They soften their precision, all to preserve cohesion. But when they decide to assert themselves, the contrast can be striking. Sudden clarity, direct articulation, structured reasoning. And that shift unsettles people who had placed them in the quiet category. The unpredictability increases tension, because now they cannot be easily labeled. And people prefer identities that are simple and stable. When someone resists categorization, others must invest cognitive effort to understand them. Effort often becomes discomfort. Discomfort often becomes distance. And over time, a familiar pattern forms. Privately admired, socially resisted. Respected for competence, excluded from closeness. This duality can feel isolating, but it reveals something fundamental about group psychology. Belonging is rarely awarded to the most capable. It is awarded to the most compatible. That distinction changes perspective, because intelligence does not automatically lead to rejection. Context determines outcome. In environments that prioritize innovation, clarity becomes magnetic. In cultures that reward independent thinking, perception is an asset. But in spaces organized around comfort, familiarity, and emotional predictability, intelligence can feel destabilizing. The difference lies in what the group protects. If truth is prioritized over harmony, clarity is welcomed. If harmony is prioritized over truth, clarity is softened. And understanding that distinction changes everything. It reframes rejection. It explains tension. It dissolves the illusion that being disliked always signals personal failure. Sometimes it signals misalignment. Sometimes it signals perceived threat. And sometimes it signals nothing more than difference operating inside a system that was never designed to accommodate it. Intelligence does not automatically elevate status. It reshapes relational dynamics. And dynamics are governed not only by ability, but by collective comfort. Perhaps the most unsettling realization is this: perception is power. But power, even quiet power, alters how people respond to you. Not always with admiration, often with caution.